Hello and welcome to On Mission, a podcast from the Catholic Apostolate Center. My name is Chris Pierno, and I'm joined on the podcast today by Father Frank Donio and Kate Fowler. We'll be discussing our 100th episode of On Mission with our special guest, Jonathan Sitko, Director of Programs at the Catholic Apostolate Center.
Woohoo!
Wow, 100. Wow.
100.
This is quite amazing. You know, when we started this, did we really think we were going to get here? It's quite...
No.
I
thought we would be done after 12.
Yeah.
But
kind of like it's apostles on mission. So you're 12. No. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, we've
Bad
gone
joke.
through a few hosts. We've had, people have moved away. It's
Yeah.
gone through different kind of iterations. This is our first recorded one with video.
Yes.
So you get to
Very
be
exciting.
shocked when you put the voice to the name.
Well, and now we've covered so many different topics. Sometimes we have a bit of a challenge finding topics, which I think drives our producer there, William, sometimes a bit wild, trying to figure out, well, what topic are you going to do? And then there's John, always in the background, our director of programs, kind of in the
John,
in the background of the whole thing.
John, why are you here? What's
Well, as we discussed kind of pre-recording, whenever there's a topic that you guys need someone to pinch hit for, I'm usually available to talk about it, at least for a bit. So, I mean...
John, you listen to a lot of podcasts.
I do listen to a lot of podcasts.
There was that guiding piece there. Of course, we cannot take away the activity of the idea of one Alex and the implementation of another Alex. So the idea of now Father Alex Boucher, and this was many years ago when podcasts were really not quite a thing. It was was kind of like the age of QR codes. They kind of came back again and but this. We started to talk about it. Sometimes we do that with Catholic Apostolate Center. We'll talk and talk and talk, and a few years will go by, and then we'll finally do it. And when we do, we actually do it. And then that's where Alex Cranston was very much involved in making this all happen early on in terms of production in our early studio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
now we do it this way.
Was that 2016?
Yeah,
we tried to figure it out last time.
We tried to figure it. Yeah, it's a little miss of time. Because we then put it all on a site, and so we have to kind of look back. But it's been a few years because it was not as regular as it is now either. I mean that was much more episodic, and now we've gotten to this regularity, two episodes a month. At least that's what we try. They were coming off of a couple of encore episodes as well, but that gives us an opportunity. We can all bring back some of our best episodes also, which is fun.
I think the first thing we talked about was Lent. I remember that was like the first podcast episode was a softball. We talked about Lent and what people do during Lent and traditions, and that was all based off of John putting together this one of these resource pages about the Lenten traditions and things.
Or was that Advent?
Oh, that was Advent.
Yeah.
John put the Advent.
They're
the
both
Advent
purple.
Too many resources.
But our first episode was about Lent. It was about
Lent. Yes, it was. It was about Lent, and it was. Again, we weren't sure. We were testing out different types of podcasts too at the time. It was before we were doing the reflections, and before we were doing other interviews or audio from some of our different work that we do, presentations and things. So we tried a couple of different styles, if I remember correctly.
Yep. Yeah, there were about 3 different styles that we were looking at. I remember, I think it was Alex Cranston and I were just sitting down and planning out, like, if we were really going to do this podcast thing well, what would be the way we would do it? I mean, as Chris has pointed out, I've listened to a lot of podcasts over the years, and, you know, podcasts even now, while still relatively niche compared to certain other formats, are you know, everybody's got a podcast is usually the phrase at this point. So we try to figure out ways to make ourselves relatively distinct in how we approach the content, you know, or whether it's the style, whether it's the content, what ways to make it so that people would find it worthwhile to listen to. And so one of the things that Alex and I were talking about is we'd love to have, you know, sort of people who understand church, understand being called on mission, but also, how do I want to say it very charitably, aren't super duper preachy about sort of the dogmas and doctrines and quote unquote hard theology of the day.
We had a whole contest, didn't we? Yes.
Oh, to name the podcast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that you guys are thinking of in infinite ways.
But we did a similar kind of survey of the team
that we did
about what kind of, well, not quite contest, but we did like what were some names? We polled the group as to a bunch of names, right? And this became the one that we thought was the best.
Yeah, to your point, John, too, there's also a lot of, like, there's certainly a lot of podcasts, but there are a lot of Catholic podcasts from all varieties of people and groups, and pick your flavor. If you want to just have, like, your, you know, something around daily readings, or something that dives into, you know, really hard topics, things that are, you know, just radio rebroadcast, and, of course, Father Mike Schmitz and his whatever he's reading nowadays. You know, I think we're in a time where people are consuming or are engaging. I guess that's a better way, engaging with their faith through all sorts of different ways. We've also seen the advent of apps like Hallow and our own app, you know, Revive and Rekindle, that focus on helping folks, you know, sort of build that daily prayer life. None of that sort of existed, you know, 7 years ago or so.
Not in that you would search, and what would you find?
Yeah, it was kind of this newer frontier that a lot of the church had yet to explore. And I think at the center, we're always asking, how can we reach people? How can we evangelize? And how can we use the tools that are given to us in these times to do that and to do it well? And so, yes, we deliberated as a team and prayed about it and thought about it for some time. But ultimately, as a center, we thought that this was a wonderful direction to go. And now, as you're all saying, we're seeing just the fruit of that all over the church. And it's really beautiful to see.
And our data shows that this is very international. We have a very international listenership. There are some of the episodes of On Mission that are very popular in a number of English-speaking countries where the Catholic Christianity, let alone Catholicism, but Christianity is in the minority. And so that kind of listenership is important to people. And that, I think, has been an important development as well, that we don't necessarily do a lot of thinking about, but because we're in the US, we're on the East Coast, you know, we're in the Washington, D.C. area. And so we kind of focus in on that. And yet there is this ability to, and we're reaching an international audience that's become fairly substantial. You know, it's not 1 million downloads or those kinds of things, but more than one would expect of something that, you know, is a conversation or an interview or around these different topics of how can we live as apostles, live as missionary disciples.
I think one of the reasons for that, if you will, is because there was an intentionality about what the topics would be. Like based on your sort of expertises and sort of the motto and mission of the center, we generally don't pick topics that are very like buzzworthy in the news unless it's like relevant to the church as a whole. Something like the Synod on Synodality, which is somewhat timely, but also pretty timeless in the sense of like, what is the concept of synodality? Or if we talk about seasonal things like Lent or Advent, we don't get to, you guys don't delve too much into the sort of hot button topics of the day, because in many ways for the people who we're talking about are active Catholics, how does that help bring people closer to God? And I think On Mission as a title is all about that idea of how do we bring people to become missionary disciples, whether in the East Coast of the US, in India, or elsewhere, wherever around the world.
I was just going to say that On Mission, the idea, at least that I can recall, though twice now I've been corrected on things on this podcast episode, we're taking it from the fact that, our baptismal call to go forth and to remain out, to evangelize. And when we were coming up with, as we've been talking about, the beginnings of this, the thought was, what is it that the center, we as the center have been trying to do with the things that we were doing at the time, which were mainly focused online, social media, resource pages, and our various partnerships and collaborations. And why were we doing that? And what was the purpose of the center? And it was to help, people kind of live out their baptismal call. And predominantly, we had talked a lot about the fact that we were focused on not necessarily going to those that need to be evangelized, but to help folks that are already sort of active Catholics living their faith. How can we equip them, to do what they're doing better, and stay on mission? And that was sort of, I think, the thought behind that.
Yeah, I like how you say equip the laity. I think that many churchgoers and Catholics are not really sitting in church thinking, I'm on mission, I'm active, I'm called to go out and really evangelize and be an evangelizer. And so I think that at the center, we're reminding our listeners that, yes, just by the virtue of your baptism, you are called to be on mission. And so we want to help, like you said, Chris, equip the laity to feel that and to feel empowered in that mission, and to say, okay, I may not have a theology degree and I may not be pursuing a religious vocation, but I can still be used to build the kingdom of God, and I still have gifts and talents, and I can still bring my personal encounter with Christ to those around me and impact my community. And so that was really at the heart of what we were hoping to do.
And one of the things that we were fairly intentional about at the beginning, and over time, it's just in the background always, and that's the spirituality of St. Vincent Pallotti and where this is coming from. And his understanding in the 1830s in Rome that all are called to be apostles, which was a radical thing, that particularly considering lay people as apostles, or anyone really other than the hierarchy that would have that name. Of course, we know in the Second Vatican Council, this is what was said in the Decree of the Apostle of the Laity, but that was in 1965. And so it's quite a span of time. And this podcast is also a way of expressing that, so that not only in terms of knowledge, but how do we live this every day? We try to be really intentional about that. Of this is important knowledge, and you can listen to all kinds of things to get knowledge. But what do I do with this in my different, and that's why we bring people in different states of life as well, different ages and different backgrounds, because that's also helpful in trying to help people live every day and realize that it's not just simply I have to go on a street corner and stand on a box and start preaching Christ, but it's in my everyday life and lived experience that I'm on mission.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for me, I'm curious and it's kind of throwing you guys a curveball, but what was a favorite, either it was an episode itself or a speaker that you guys have had that you think was something that you all enjoyed? Like, I think, I've listened to so many of them because I help review them. And so I'm going to pick one of my own just so that I don't offend anybody. But I actually really enjoyed the conversation. I don't know, it must have been like a couple years ago, just talking about like church management. I mean, it was something I got a degree in, as everyone here on this call knows. And, Father Frank and I can talk all about like weird church management stuff from our time at Villanova. But I think, covering topics like that are a little outside of the normal buzzy things, I think is a testament to sort of the longevity of the program, if that makes any sense, because it covers areas around the church, around active discipleship and how these things affect, day-to-day life in a church. If you stick around for our next recording, we're going to talk about stewardship, which is, of course, an incredibly important topic around sort of management and churches and stuff like that. But I enjoyed doing that because I think, may not help everybody, but at least it gives an awareness to the person who I always think of as like, they attend mass every Sunday, but they don't necessarily know all these weird minutia type things in the day-to-day life of the U.S. church. And I think are helpful things for people to understand sort of contextually what's going on in the world.
I will go back and say that I think one of the more interesting, at least in my opinion, we had a guest on, and I think it was Joe Basala, and we had a whole discussion about church vestments. And to your point about
that was fun.
Your point, John, about like, okay, I mean, yes, obviously, if you go to church often enough, you're going to notice the colors change. But we really dove into, why those things why those changes exist, and why colors are chosen, why they were chosen, and what do they mean. And I think I have pointed folks to that episode, that are interested in those sorts of questions, why we do things the way that we do, and not to Father's point earlier about knowledge is not knowledge for knowledge's sake, but what do we do with that information? I think it's because people ask those kinds of questions a lot, and people want to be equipped with the right answers. I think that we don't want to go around saying, I don't give them the wrong information. People want to be equipped with those answers. That's my favorite.
Yeah, I love sitting alongside you all and discussing and just learning together as well, having experts come in, and it's just, seeing people thrive and talking about what they're passionate about within the church. For me, I love any time that we get together and discuss marriage and family life. That currently is my mission territory. That's where I'm on mission, and my vocation has changed over the years with the center. When I first started working for the center back in 2015, I was engaged, and then I was married, and now I have 3 children. And so my role, not only at the center, but in my personal life, has just changed over those years. And so I love reflecting on with others and learning from others about marriage and family life and my vocation, and just really thinking about how I'm spending most of my day and seeing that in a theological light. So I've had a lot of fun with any of our episodes on marriage and family.
I enjoy the episodes where we bring on our team members, because sometimes team members for the center, because we have over the years, we've had a number of people who have worked as part of our team or are collaborators with us, or go from staff members to collaborators, and are people who have been advisors as well, and to bring them, into the conversation. And not just simply that they're behind the scenes, or maybe they're writing something, but to be part of the conversation and bring their their experience and their expertise and their passion for the faith to the conversation. And I think that I've always found really fruitful. People also, as their lives change. You mentioned yours, Kate. We've had people, other people who are married. We have other people who are in religious life, and other people who are priests now, and been a part of the conversation. And that also, I think, has been an interesting aspect of On Mission. Also, I think too, there is just this reality that it's mostly a younger group of voices, and that's not just simply talking about the things of the youth that so often, but instead the things of church and living a life of faith, and that this is not like you're some kind of Catholic Amish, off to the side and not involved in day-to-day life.
Yeah, that was one of the things you and those building the center at the beginning were very intentional about. That this was not an organization that was either sort of ministering only to young adults, but had young adults involved in its upkeep, its administration, its establishment from the very beginning to show the world that we're more than just being a young adult. Although all of us are not young adults anymore, at least not what we used to be. But
I think our producer qualifies in the young adult.
That's true.
And yes, you all still qualify. You all still qualify according to the USCCB.
That's very true.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Few more years
until you're 39. But that's very true. And we keep adding people in who are younger.
We didn't stop. Yeah.
No, we didn't stop that. And so those voices are still a part of what we're doing, but at the same time, voices of a variety of people as well, and that I think has been an important aspect of what the center is about, but On Mission also is about.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about. We sort of touched on this, but the other podcasts that have sort of come out of this podcast, or John, you've been heavily involved in a lot of that work. Maybe you could tell our listeners, how else can they engage with us on their various podcasts?
Oh, you'd like me to plug all of our podcasts from the Catholic Apostolate?
But why was
Network?
On Mission not enough? Why did we need more?
I mean, I always love talking about the Catholic Apostolate Center podcast network, but we have, I mean, William and actually pretty much everyone on this call are very heavily involved in various aspects of it, whether from the actual creation of it, in the case of like Father Frank with our reflections, which he can talk about very brief or after I'm done plugging all of our other podcasts. But then we also have our blogcasts, which a number of pretty much everyone here has either recorded them or written from our various blogs over the years. And that goes strong every couple of weeks on our resources feed. And then in Infinite Ways is our newest one, relatively speaking, which Brian Rood, who is a staff member as well, and myself interview various people around sort of the church sphere, not necessarily people who are church professionals, though we have a number of those, but more so the people who are sort of exemplifying how God calls all of us in different ways. I think Pilati would find that pretty appropriate that we sit down and talk with people like that who have a variety of stories, because all of us here have crazy stories and how we've been involved actively in our the faith journey and how God has called us. And so Brian and I wanted to basically take the time and hear those stories from our friends and collaborators and just people who know the mission of the center. So I think I got all of them. Oh, then we have very time with our webinars or interviews of one-off things. We have those in there as well, from presentations to all sorts of stuff. And so I'm going to stop talking and let Father Frank talk a bit more about the reflections piece.
Sure. And I think we went from a studio-based situation to a studio and then somebody remote. And then, as COVID came along, we moved to this format, and it's worked very well for us. And we're able to record all sorts of things, I think, as a result. And that has helped us to expand some of our podcasts, Catholic Apostolate Center podcast.com. And then all these, and 3 separate feeds with On Mission and Reflections and Resources. And the Reflections were, again, a COVID, really a shutdown reality. When there were people who asked if there could be some reflections, and it was going to be a short-term type of thing, and then it's now stretched into 3 solid years of weekly reflections, and that and now we're working on also a book of those reflections. Some of taking about 50 or so of the reflections and turning them into a book. So it's been an interesting journey with this, and one that has had a lot of team members involved. One team member at one point was getting them on all the podcast,
all the different players
and things. I mean, it was really quite something, all the different pieces of this over the last years, not just simply with On Mission, but just a whole expansion of podcasting that the center has been doing.
Yeah, I think one thing that is important, and I want to mention it just because it came out about a month ago for those who are on this feed. One of the things I'm actually quite proud of that we worked on as a staff was a series of interviews with bishops. I can't help but plug it if I can. A series of bishops related to World Youth Day in Lisbon this past month, but because this will come out in October, I want to mention that it is available for everyone to listen, and just sort of talking about even though it's talking about World Youth Day, but I think that lived experience of being missionary, of being pilgrims, I think is such an important thing. And I think our On Mission audience would find something like that interesting. So Catholic Apostolate Center podcast.com is a good place to view it. I want to make sure I plug it anywhere I can. So I figured I'd mention it here since I figured this audience would probably enjoy something like that. But we had everyone from Archbishop Bergoglio to all sorts of different bishops from around the country talking about the sort of lived experience of the Pilgrim World Youth Day. So, yeah.
With much of the reflection being not just simply about World Youth Day, but things that can be applicable to daily life and living on mission, living holiness in daily life. So where are we going then in terms of this?
Oh,
that's what I was going to ask.
Probably I'll just close it down, and 100 was good, and
that's it. We're done. We're wrap it up.
Here's our face, and you won't see it again.
I think the sky's the limit. As I think as long as we can keep coming up with some really good topics and some really good ideas for people to bring on and introduce to our listeners. John was talking about earlier, there's really all sorts of different ways that we can break things down and talk about topics. I think one of the things, if folks out there have ideas on what they'd like to hear us talk about, I would certainly encourage you to send us your ideas for topics. Go ahead and send them to info@catholicapostolatecenter.org, or fill out the contact us form on our website, CatholicApostolateCenterPodcast.com. But I think the sky's the limit. I mean, what are other folks think? Anyone disagree with that?
I don't think we've got a lot. I don't have disagreement, but I think that there is a continued opportunity for us to, that there are always topics that will arise. I don't think, with with the faith, there's always something. But to John's earlier point, we've tried to do that as a center in general, not just with this podcast, where we're not about dealing with the hot button issues of the moment, whatever the issue of the moment is, but instead to be more reflective about, and we may be responding to some of those issues, but we're responding in a more reflective, more in a deeper way around topics that are important and maybe being talked about in the church, but not just simply a little soundbite, but instead all of these things that people will opine about are very complex. And I think one thing that we've tried to do is to help people enter into that complexity, but not with a lot of with appropriate language, but in a way in which it's explained that a Catholic can not only understand, but can delve into more. That's why we keep putting additional resources on each of the podcasts. That if you want to learn more about this, well, here's a bunch of good links that can give you more information about that, because I think that's a little different too than some things that are out there where it's just maybe just linking to the same stuff, but instead, or nothing, but instead to provide here's more if you want to go more deeply into this topic.
I mean, coming from a sort of background / casual observer / listener to and reviewer of all the episodes, I think for me, the thing that always reminds me is this idea that, one of the advantages of not having such very topical stuff is some of our most popular episodes are episodes from a couple years ago that, are about topics you wouldn't think would be necessarily the most popular. I think of the Holy Helpers that Joe Basala did a number of years ago is a very popular one. But also, the ones you would expect, things on marriage, things on family life, things on baptism, that I think for the center revisiting, you can't cover the entirety of baptism in a 30-minute podcast, for example. These are theological concepts that have had centuries of reflections and discussions and lived experiences that change and mutate depending on not only the time in which you're living, but also the location in which you are. And so I think, for the center and for On Mission, I think revisiting some of those topics that we've already discussed, but in sort of what we would say like a slightly different spin or having a different guest on, who can provide a unique perspective on these things, I think is an opportunity that we have that would be great for our audience, quite frankly. At least I would hope so. And I think, but keeping to that same sort of mission and keeping into the same focuses of the center's mission, I think will make it, continuously fresh and unique.
Well, John, thanks for being with us today. Congratulations to all of us and the center on 100 episodes of On Mission. I can say personally, it's been a pleasure being a part of this journey. I know I speak for all of us when I say thank you to the listeners out there. Really encourage you to write to us. Let us know what your thoughts are on 100 episodes. As I said earlier, send us in some thoughts on topics you'd like to hear about. But very importantly, if you are listening to us today, take a moment and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Google Play or wherever you get your podcasts. Really, as you've heard from all of the other podcasts you listen to, it goes a long way in helping get the word out about what we're doing here. And if you found some value in what we've talked about over 100 episodes, I would really, really encourage you to go ahead and give us a review. But as we've done for almost nearly 100 episodes, this wraps up another episode of On Mission from the Catholic Apostolate Center. Be sure to subscribe and share and review so you don't miss an episode. You can find more On Mission podcast episodes, as well as the episodes for in infinite ways, our reflections, our resources on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts, or our special podcast website, Catholic Apostolate Center Podcast.com. Thank you, and thanks for 100 episodes.